This week on Arizona Illustrated, magnificent predators face an uncertain future in an ever-growing urban environment. A native way to heal, a runner's journey, and impeaching Arizona's governor from the vault. Welcome to Arizona Illustrated. I'm Tom McNamara. A Spanish settlement over 300 years ago in the region we now refer to as Tucson changed not only the cultural and political landscape, but also the actual landscape itself. The exotic plants brought in over the intervening centuries have altered the native Sonoran desert habitat, which has affected many of the original animal species, some for the better and some for the worse.
There's sort of a joke about raptors. All they really need to inhabit a place is to fit within the thermal profile of a place, give them a place for a nest and something to eat, and they'll inhabit that place. And that isn't exactly true, but it can be generally thought of as true. In some ways, if you look at the Tucson Basin and think about what it was early on in its history before humans settled in any meaningful way, it had sort of a scrubland. But now what we've done is sort of converted into much more of a forest, like a sort of semi-tropical forest. You can find lots of those kinds of trees and other ones brought in from other places that have some of those same sort of tall, larger characteristics all over town. And they're subsidized by water and fertilizer, so we have created this relatively rich, sort of thriving, high productivity environment in an arid system. Early on in Tucson's history, some of those species, like Cooper's hawks, might have been here originally, but they were sort of restricted to the riparian areas, the sort of most wet places in the region.
For the Cooper's hawk, one of the world's most skilled flyers, the exotic trees that humans have brought with them provide opportunities. The Cooper's hawk has made the best of the towering eucalyptus from Australia and the giant Aleppo pine native to the Mediterranean. They use the trees primarily for perches, and most importantly, for nesting.
The eggs are incubated about 30 days, and then once they hatch, they stay in the nest for another 30 days or so, and then for another month or so, they are in the nest area and being fed, and eventually are weaned, begin to hunt on their own. The male does all the hunting, provisioning food for the female and nestlings from the beginning of the nesting cycle until they fledge, basically. Cooper's hawks generally eat birds, and that's part of the reason they're so abundant in town, and urban areas tend to have a tremendous amount of food in terms of bird life available for them. So the nesting densities are quite high here, probably as a result of that abundance of food.
Not all raptors adjust equally to human presence. The largest raptor in North America, the golden eagle, avoids the same urban areas the Cooper's hawk seeks out. The presence of tall trees, lush green lawns, and the water that comes with them tends to help out the most mobile animals. Those benefits are not equal across the animal kingdom.
Any of the changes that humans introduce to a place is inevitably going to be good for some species and bad for other species. The downside of that usually is that we tend to make environments that are relatively homogeneous, things that humans like in a place, like park settings. The downside of that is often what we lose are the species that have sort of unique habitat requirements, is that there is something special about that place that encourage them to live there, to inhabit that sort of place, and often those are lost in these sort of transitions. So when we change the land use of a place from its native sort of setting to the sort of suburban sort of common footprint that we see is often the things that are novel, the species that are novel in a place tend to be displaced.
Even for those species like the Cooper's hawk, whose existence in the city is easier overall, there are added dangers that come with the urban life.
One of the primary agents of mortality for adult Cooper's hawks in these urban areas is flying into windows. Cooper's hawks and other birds can't distinguish between reflection and reality, so they see a reflection in the window as a place to fly, and so they fly into them and injure or sometimes kill themselves. It's frequently in pursuit of other birds, so it's not uncommon for us to get a call from a homeowner to say they heard two thuds outside their home and go outside and find a dead dove and a dead hawk beside it after having crashed into the window.
Another unseen but fatal hazard for raptors is electricity, carried in the wires atop the poles scattered across the city by the electric utility. TEP.
We've worked with Tucson Electric Power over the last 10 years to develop a program to reduce the number of electrocuted birds in Tucson. It's primarily focused on those larger bodied birds like red-tailed hawks and great horned owls and Harris's hawks. The program in the last 5 or 6 years has become really effective, and we think it's making a big difference.
While it's nearly impossible to insulate all the poles, the significant reduction in raptor fatalities is directly linked to TEP's efforts. Other actions to mitigate the human impact on urban wildlife are also happening on a much smaller scale, even in backyards.
People talk about trying to do things like create local spaces for wildlife, and I think all of that's positive. You know, we feed birds, mostly that's for our benefit rather than theirs. We create sort of small spaces, hummingbird gardens, and all that stuff is really great. The challenge, I think, is to really deal with the processes that are affecting wildlife at the broadest scales. So we could make small-scale changes with plantings, maybe returning some native vegetation in developed areas that are going to be a net positive. But the real challenge is to think about how to address the sort of adverse effects that are happening at the greatest scales. That is a real challenge in general.
It's uncertain how humans will address these large-scale challenges in the future, but there are still opportunities to enjoy some of those species that have successfully adjusted to the changes of the past.
And it's fun, even this morning when I woke up, I was sitting in the back with a cup of coffee, and I hear two Cooper's hawks calling from different places, and they're having a story. And you know, even though I realize that that's a consequence of changes that humans have wrought, I still sort of enjoy it. So I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with taking advantage of some of the consequences of the things that we've done, for better or for worse.
Raptors, Kings of the Sky, an original AZPM documentary featuring much more about these magnificent birds of prey, premieres on Monday, November 3rd at 10 p.m. When you think of mental health and substance abuse treatment, counseling and medications may come to mind. Yet more and more treatment facilities are turning to traditional American Indian ceremonies and practices, and researchers are still trying to figure out why they help people heal.
Every morning I get up and I go outside and stand towards the east and I start praying. I was told that was the time of where the holy people are around, and that when they see me out there sprinkling my white corn and Mother Earth feels it, Father Sky sees me, that's where I get in touch with, you know, the first glimmer of light for today. That's what I need for my spirit, to help me glow throughout the day, to give of that kind of spirit to others.
Every day, Sheila Claw Starr shares her spirit with people going through some of the toughest times of their lives. She uses the prayers and traditions she learned from her grandmother on the Navajo reservation to help them heal.
Detox centers, rehab centers, transitional homes, halfway houses, jails, prisons, juvenile centers. There are times when I go to the hospitals. There are times when I go to families who are having problems, especially with women with domestic violence and the children who are sexually abused. Wherever I go, that's what I'm going to give out, is the love and the care.
I wanted to welcome each and every one of you here to this talking circle.
I know I want to be clean and sober. been an addict pretty much most of my life. I'm just grateful that I have that chance.
I'm here today and been creative with that. That's all I got.
Until recently, American Indian spiritual practices like talking circles and sweat lodges were hard to find in traditional mental health and substance abuse treatment, says therapist Gabriel Basurto.
When I first started in the field, we didn't talk about cultural diversity. It was one size fits all, and that was it. Cookie cutter. If you respond to this, fine. If you don't respond to this approach, fine. That's on you. You didn't try. When we started learning about cultural, elements into treatment, things started changing.
That's Ray and Sheila coming. Okay. So let Betty know what we're doing.
Edward Grijalva, a counselor with Pasquayaki and Tohono O'odham roots, saw the change and its impact firsthand when he developed one of Southern Arizona's first culture-based treatment programs.
We incorporated the use of native spirituality like medicine men and that sort of thing. When you incorporate culture into the treatment services, research has shown us that the outcomes are great. We saw many people just change their lives dramatically.
Scientists don't know why these spiritual practices help people heal, but researcher Tommy Begay is trying to change that. He studies how historical trauma, the centuries of forced assimilation, displacement, and violence that American Indian communities endured, affects physical and mental health across generations.
What really left the people, Native American people, indigenous people, is really a loss of identity, a loss of a spiritual connection.
Tommy Begay's research suggests that spiritual connection has a measurable effect on the body and mind. It can trigger the parasympathetic nervous system, the part of the nervous system that soothes us.
The healing capacity of traditional Native American modalities such as sweat lodge and also talking circle group. It's to sort of bring, use sacred traditional experiential methods to, focus on bringing the parasympathetic nervous system into play and bringing a person to peace.
Sheila Claw-Starr doesn't need to know why her traditions heal. She experienced what they can do in her own struggle with addiction.
I didn't want that anymore, that life anymore. I wanted to better myself. I wanted to be a more positive person, and I wanted to love myself for who I am. That was the only way I knew how, was to go back to my tradition and my prayers and my songs, my ceremonies.
Now Sheila shares what she found with others.
However way you want to express yourself, this is like your time.
In the process, she's helping to rewrite the rules of mental health and substance abuse treatment.
It is a way of connecting with our clients, whereas before it was them and us. Now it's us, all together. So it's a vital, important piece now that we're learning as far as the treatment is concerned, and bringing this element, into this program has been nothing but positive and effective.
It's all about the beauty way. It's all about being one within yourself, your mind, body, and spirit. Because if you don't know who you are and where you're coming from, the spirit is unbalanced. And so when they get that knowledge back into them, that's when they mend their spirit.
Like what you see on Arizona Illustrated? Visit our webpage at azpm.org to watch and share videos from this episode. You'll also find stories from future programs, an easy way to submit your own story idea, an archive of past episodes of Arizona Illustrated, and you'll find everything you need to stay connected with public broadcasting in Southern Arizona. azpm.org. Success in distance running does not come easy. It is a result of hard work and sacrifice. For Craig Curley, a 24-year-old from the tiny town of Kenlichi, Arizona, on the Navajo Nation, success in running has attracted the attention of corporate sponsors and may provide an opportunity to compete in the 2016 Olympics. Running is also the living embodiment of his Navajo heritage.
Chance luck that got him here. His sister was already in Tucson going to school here, and she came to my office and said, hey, I've got a brother who runs up in Ganado. He's thinking about coming down here. And so I got on the computer and looked him up. He was state champion that year for cross country, and I said I want him here. If you're not healthy, then we just do what we've always done, and you've been brilliant at it. We get you healed, and we come back on Saturday morning if we need to. We find a way to make it happen. It really is a dream relationship. When you have an athlete who wants to do so much that you spend your time telling them, hey, I need you to back off a little bit, then you can accomplish so much more.
Don't slow down, just relax. Good, good, good. You look good.
In other cases, when the coach is pushing and the coach seems to want it more than the athlete, there's really nowhere to go. I wanted him to be successful in every fiber I have, but he wants it even more than I do.
All right, boys and girls, you guys ready to race? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Oh, the course is good, man. This is one of the races. It's a benchmark for you, especially for me in my training. Getting out here on these hills and being around the community. It gives a good vibe, so it changes up things in training. Runners, some people like the pain, you know. That's what makes them good hill runners. When they run up a hill and they feel that pain, they're like, oh, I'm hurting, but I'm getting better, so I'm gonna go with it. My Navajo culture is many beliefs in running towards the east. Every sunrise is the start of a new day, a new beginning, and that's a blessing.
Driving up there slow, it takes me back to my memories of my childhood. This is where I go to get my energy. I'm trying to give something to the youth where they can see a role model.
Let me introduce to you St. Michael graduate class of 2006, Craig Curley.
I was in the same place you guys were. I was on a cross-country team. Part of being better and getting to reach your goals is just by participating, by being there every day, because every day you learn something new. One of the joys of coming in here is I kind of go undercover, really. I can walk into a room and be like, this is Craig Curley, the alumni. It's not the runner. And that way I share stories with them. You guys are the runners. You guys are going to be the leaders. Runners are leaders. You know why? Because every time you go out for a run, you get to see the world.
St. Michael Indian School is a Catholic-based school, but they also incorporate traditional tribal values into the program. As far as running, we also try to incorporate Navajo teachings. We are taught to run early in the morning in the east, that you live on Mother Earth and that you breathe in the air, which we call Father Sky, and each step you take or each breath you make, you are using those elements. In a lot of native towns and reservations, there's alcoholism. There is some drug use here. Dropout is pretty high on the reservation here. And then just peer pressure and bullying, those issues that the kids do face. How I try to push our team, even how big or little it is that we all treat each other like a family and have fun, and we have our ups and downs just like a family, but we keep laughing and treating each other that way.
Good job, guys.
Most of my runs are to train, and that doesn't feel good. Then there's times where my recovery days where it's running for joy. I'm just without a watch. I'm just running. Those are good too. Those are needed as well. This is the place where my coach told me, when you're here, whatever bad happened to you, you don't have to think about. When you're here, you're in the moment, you think about now. I felt my upbringing was better in the sense that no one knew who I was. They weren't interested in my talent because it wasn't revealed at that time. So it was mostly like, all right, go ahead and run. And I fell in love with running.
Evan Mecham served 15 months as Arizona's governor before a dramatic impeachment trial removed him from office in 1988. We remember those dark days in Arizona's political history in this week's From the Vault.
By your vote of 21 ayes and 9 noes, Evan Mecham is convicted of high crimes, misdemeanors, or malfeasance in office as contained in Article 1 of the Articles of Impeachment.
The dramatic conclusion of the Mecham administration came 15 months after he was sworn into office by Chief Justice Frank Gordon, who would ironically preside over the impeachment trial. Mecham was tried on 2 of 3 articles of impeachment sent to the Senate. The first involved an alleged death threat told to this woman, Peggy Griffith.
He said, your friend Donna is a W-H-O-R-E. He spelled out the word. And he said, there are friends of the governor's that is very angry at her, and if she doesn't keep her goddamn mouth shut, that she will take a long boat ride.
The man who allegedly made the threat, Lee Watkins, refused to testify.
Mr. French, on the advice of counsel, I respectfully refuse to answer any questions asserting my Fifth Amendment rights.
Governor Mecham took the witness stand on both articles of impeachment. On the first, he maintained that he had broken no laws and outlined his belief that there was a conspiracy to create the case against him.
There's a fellow named Pat Murphy that's publisher of some very, very important newspapers in this town, and Pat hates me and loves and protects him, and perhaps that has something to do with it.
After the completion of testimony on Article 1, the Senate impeachment trial turned to Article 3, the charge that Governor Mecham misused public funds by loaning $80,000 from the so-called Protocol Fund to Mecham Pontiac. An accountant testified that Mecham Pontiac desperately needed the $80,000 loan. Governor Mecham testified that he felt the loan was perfectly legal, but perhaps politically stupid. He explained the information he says he had about how that money was to be spent.
You can spend it for any damn thing you want. Those are his words, except you can't spend it for politics or for personal living expenses.
Closing arguments were predictably dramatic.
The purpose of impeachment is not to punish the abusive office holder, but to protect the interests of the state.
I'm asking you, where's the beef? Governor Mecham has been fighting City Hall. That's why he's got triple threats against him. I want you to search your minds and your hearts and ask yourself why a man who is faced with defending himself in those forums, why he doesn't resign. He doesn't resign because he's not guilty of these charges.
Mecham was found guilty by the state Senate, but was later exonerated on criminal charges in his Maricopa County Superior Court trial.
A reminder that you can watch all of Arizona Illustrated stories on our webpage, azpm.org. Thank you for joining us here on Arizona Illustrated. Next week, a Veterans Day salute to the men and women who served and call Arizona home. From memories of battles fought in World War II and Korea to bonds formed in service that continue to grow, to a behind-the-scenes tour of the Boneyard. Veteran stories on the next Arizona Illustrated. I'm Tom McNamara. We'll see you next week.